Emma Thompson stood at her bedroom window, watching the rain streak down the glass as she clutched a faded photograph in her hands. The image showed a proud man in a red tunic and tall black hat, standing at attention outside Buckingham Palace. His eyes held the same determined gleam that Emma saw in her own reflection each morning. This was her father, Sergeant Major William Thompson, who had served as a royal guard for 15 years before his life was cut short in a car accident when Emma was only 12. Now, at 22, Emma was facing the biggest decision of her life. She had just graduated from university with a degree in international relations, and everyone expected her to pursue a career in diplomacy or government. Her mother, Margaret, had always encouraged her to choose a different path than her father's military service. "You're too smart for all that ceremony and standing around," her mother would say. Not understanding that Emma saw it as so much more than that, the acceptance letter from the Foreign Office lay unopened on her desk. It represented everything her professors and family thought she should want: a prestigious job, good salary, opportunities for advancement, and a chance to use her education in meaningful ways. But every time she looked at it, she felt a hollow sensation in her chest, as if something important was missing. Emma walked over to her father's old trunk, which she had kept in her room since his death. Inside were his medals, commendations, and a leather-bound journal where he had written about his experiences as a guard. She opened it to a random page and read his familiar handwriting. "Today a little girl asked me why I stand so still. I told her it's because I'm protecting something precious, and that requires all of my attention and respect. She smiled and said she wanted to protect precious things too when she grew up." The memory of that conversation came flooding back. Emma had been that little girl, visiting her father at work on a school holiday. She remembered feeling so proud as he explained his duties, the history of the regiment, and the honor that came with serving the crown. He had never pressured her to follow his path, but he had instilled in her a deep respect for service, duty, and tradition. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Lucy. "Did you open the Foreign Office letter yet? We should celebrate your new career." Emma stared at the message, knowing that Lucy, like everyone else, assumed she would accept the position without question. After all, it was everything a bright young graduate should want. But Emma's heart was pulling her in a different direction entirely. For months, she had been secretly researching what it would take to join the household division and eventually become a royal guard like her father. The physical requirements were demanding, the training was intense, and the commitment was substantial. More importantly, she would be one of the very few women to ever attempt this path. As the guard regiments had only recently begun accepting female recruits, Emma closed her father's journal and made her way downstairs to the kitchen where her mother was preparing dinner. Margaret looked up as Emma entered, noticing the thoughtful expression on her daughter's face. "You've been awfully quiet lately, love. Is everything all right? Are you nervous about starting your new job?" Margaret asked, stirring a pot of soup on the stove. Emma took a deep breath, knowing this conversation had been inevitable. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I haven't opened the Foreign Office letter yet because I'm not sure it's the right path for me." Margaret set down her spoon and turned to face her daughter fully. "What do you mean?" "Emma, this is a wonderful opportunity. Your father would have been so proud to see you succeed in such an important career. But what if there's another way to make him proud?" Emma asked softly. "What if I could honor his memory by following his example of service?" A look of concern crossed Margaret's face as she seemed to understand where this conversation was heading. "Emma, please tell me you're not thinking about the military. I've already lost your father to that world. I can't bear the thought of losing you too." Emma reached across the counter and took her mother's hands. "It's not about danger, ma'am. It's about purpose. Every day I wake up feeling like something is missing, like I'm not living up to who I'm supposed to be. When I read Dad's journals, when I think about his stories, I feel something I don't feel anywhere else." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "But you're so intelligent, Emma. You could do anything with your life. Why would you want to stand around in ceremony when you could be changing the world through diplomacy?" "Maybe standing guard is changing the world," Emma replied. "Dad always said that protecting something precious requires complete dedication. What if I could protect traditions, history, and everything that makes our country special?" What if I could show other young women that they can serve their country in ways people never expected? The kitchen fell silent, except for the gentle bubbling of the soup on the stove. Margaret studied her daughter's face, seeing the same determination that had driven William to excel in everything he did. She remembered how proud he had been of his service, how he had spoken about the honor and responsibility that came with wearing the uniform. "Have you really thought this through?" Margaret asked finally. "The training would be incredibly difficult, especially for a woman. And the scrutiny you'd face as one of the first female guards would be intense." Emma nodded. "I've been researching it for months. I know it won't be easy, but easy has never been the point, has it? Dad didn't choose his path because it was easy. He chose it because it meant something." 3 weeks later, Emma found herself standing outside the Army Careers Information Office, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had spent days preparing for this moment, researching everything she could about the Guards Division and the requirements for joining. In her bag, she carried copies of her university transcripts, fitness records, and a letter of recommendation from her former rugby coach, the recruiting sergeant. A woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake, welcomed Emma into her office. "Miss Thompson, I have to say, your application has certainly caught our attention. It's not every day we see someone with your academic background is interested in joining the Guards." Emma straightened in her chair. "I understand it might seem unusual, but this is something I've wanted for a long time. My father served as a Royal Guard, and I've always admired the dedication and honor that comes with that role." "Sergeant Major William Thompson," the recruiter said, consulting her notes. "Yes, I remember him. He had an excellent reputation. But I have to ask, Emma, are you prepared for what this will entail? The physical demands alone are significant. And as one of the few women attempting this path, you'll face additional challenges." "I've been training for months," Emma replied confidently. "I run 5 miles every morning. I've been working with weights. I've maintained my fitness since playing university rugby. But more than that, I understand the mental and emotional commitment required. This isn't just about physical strength." The recruiter nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the right attitude. Tell me, what do you think being a Royal Guard means in today's world?" "Some people see it as just ceremony and tradition." Emma had thought about this question many times. "I believe it's about being a bridge between past and present. We live in a world that's changing rapidly, where people sometimes feel disconnected from their history and heritage. The Guards represent continuity, stability, and the idea that some things are worth preserving and protecting. But it's also about service in the most fundamental sense. Being willing to put something larger than yourself at the center of your life." The conversation continued for over an hour, covering everything from Emma's motivations to her understanding of military hierarchy and protocol. The recruiter explained the training process, which would begin with basic military training before moving on to specialized Guards training. She also discussed the reality of being one of the first women in this role. "You'll be watched closely," she warned. "Some people will be rooting for you to succeed, others will be waiting for you to fail. There will be media attention, and every mistake you make will be scrutinized. Are you prepared for that level of pressure?" Emma thought of her father's journal entries, where he had written about the honor and responsibility of representing something greater than himself. "I think pressure is part of the privilege. If it was easy, it wouldn't mean as much. I'm not doing this to prove a point about women in the military. I'm doing this because I believe I can serve with honor and make my father proud." By the end of the meeting, Emma had completed her formal application and scheduled her fitness assessments and interviews. As she walked out of the office, she felt a sense of rightness that she had never experienced before. This was her path. 6 months into her training at the Infantry Training Center, Emma was pushed to her limits in ways she had never imagined. The physical demands were exactly as challenging as promised. But it was the mental fortitude required that truly tested her resolve. Every morning began at 5:30 with a grueling fitness routine, followed by weapons training, drill practice, and classroom instruction on military history and protocol. Emma's bunkmates had initially been skeptical about having a woman among their ranks, but she had gradually earned their respect through her determination and refusal to ask for any special treatment. Private Johnson, a burly young man from Manchester, had become one of her closest friends after she helped him through a particularly difficult navigation exercise. "Thompson, you're either completely mad or the toughest person I've ever met," he said one evening, as they cleaned their rifles after a long day of training. "Most people would have quit by now." "Quitting isn't an option," Emma replied, carefully inspecting her weapon. "My father always said that when you commit to something bigger than yourself, you find strength you didn't know you had." The training sergeant, a weathered veteran named Sergeant Major Collins, had been particularly demanding with Emma, but she understood why. He knew that if she was going to succeed in the Guards, she would need to be better than adequate. She would need to be exceptional. "Thompson," he barked during one particularly intense drill session, "your marching is sloppy. The tourists at Buckingham Palace aren't going to be impressed by approximations. They expect perfection." Emma snapped to attention and adjusted her posture. "Yes, Sergeant Major. I'll get it right." After the session, Sergeant Major Collins approached her privately. "You're doing well, Thompson, but I need you to understand something. When you eventually stand guard at the palace, you'll be representing not just yourself or even your regiment. You'll be representing every woman who might follow in your footsteps. That's a heavy responsibility, I understand, Sergeant Major," Emma replied. "I don't take it lightly." "Good," he said, his stern expression softening slightly. "Your father was one of the finest soldiers I ever served with. He'd be proud of how hard you're working. But he'd also want you to remember that excellence isn't just about following orders perfectly. It's about understanding why those orders matter." That evening, Emma called her mother, who had gradually come to support her daughter's choice despite her initial concerns. "How are you holding up, love?" Margaret asked. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done," Emma admitted, "but also the most rewarding. Every day, I feel like I'm becoming the person I was meant to be. I can almost feel Dad's presence sometimes. It's like he's guiding me through the difficult moments." "He would be so proud of you," Margaret said softly. "I was wrong to discourage you. I can hear it in your voice, how much this means to you." "You found your calling," as Emma hung up the phone. She looked around at her fellow trainees, all of whom were preparing for their upcoming assessments. In just a few weeks, they would find out who would be selected for the prestigious Guards Division. The competition was fierce, and only the very best would make it through. The final selection process was more intense than anything Emma had experienced during her months of training. Over 3 days, the candidates were evaluated on everything, from their drill precision to their knowledge of royal protocol, to their ability to remain motionless for extended periods while maintaining perfect posture. On the second day, Emma faced her most challenging test yet, standing at attention for 2 hours while instructors tried to distract her with unexpected movements, loud noises, and even tourists pretending to interact with her. This simulation was designed to replicate the real conditions she would face as a royal guard, where maintaining composure despite distractions was essential. As she stood perfectly still, Emma's mind wandered to a story her father had told her years ago. He had described a day when a child had approached him during his guard duty, asking if he was a real person or a statue, rather than being annoyed by the interruption. He had been touched by the child's innocent curiosity and had later written in his journal about how that moment reminded him of the wonder and magic that the Guards represented. 2 visitors from around the world. Candidate Thompson called out the evaluating officer. "A tourist is asking you for directions. How do you respond?" Without breaking her stance or moving her eyes, Emma replied in a clear, respectful voice, "I would politely explain that while I cannot leave my post, I would be happy to direct them to the Visitor Information Center where they can receive proper assistance." The officer nodded and made a note on his clipboard. Emma maintained her position for the remaining duration of the test, focusing on her breathing and the honor she felt in potentially following her father's footsteps. That evening, the candidates gathered in the mess hall to await the results. The tension was palpable as everyone tried to gauge their performance against their peers. Emma sat quietly, thinking about how far she had come from that rainy afternoon in her bedroom when she had first considered this path. Private. Johnson sat down beside her. Whatever happens, Thompson, you should be proud. You've shown everyone here what determination looks like. Thank you, Emma replied. But I won't feel complete until I know I've earned my place. This isn't about proving anything to anyone else anymore. It's about proving to myself that I can honor my father's legacy. When Sergeant Major Collins entered the room, the conversation immediately stopped. He carried a sealed envelope and wore the serious expression of someone about to deliver life-changing news to young soldiers who had invested. Everything in this moment, ladies and gentlemen, he began. The selection process for the Guards Division has been completed. This was one of the most competitive groups we've ever evaluated. Each of you should be proud of your effort and commitment. Emma's heart was racing as she waited for her name to be called. She thought about her mother, who would be waiting anxiously by the phone, and about her father, whose presence she had felt throughout this entire journey. The following candidates have been selected for the Guards Division, Sergeant Major Collins announced, opening the envelope. Private Davies, Private Martinez, Private Johnson. ... Double quotes. Emma held her breath as the list continued. Each name that wasn't hers made her heart sink a little further, but she maintained her composure just as she had been trained to do. And finally, the sergeant major said, looking directly at Emma, Private Thompson. 6 months later, Emma stood at the same gates of Buckingham Palace where her father had served with distinction for 15 years. She wore the iconic red tunic and tall black bearskin hat, and her boots gleamed with the same pride that had once reflected in her father's uniform. The weight of the uniform felt both familiar and momentous, as if she was wearing not just clothing, but a piece of history itself. The morning was crisp and clear, and tourists were already beginning to gather for the changing of the guard ceremony. Emma took her position with the precision and dignity that had been drilled into her through months of intensive training. As she stood at attention, she could almost feel her father's presence beside her, guiding her posture and reminding her of the honor she now carried. Margaret stood among the crowd of spectators, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter take her place in the ceremony. She had brought Williams's old journal with her. She clutched it tightly as she watched Emma march with perfect precision alongside her fellow guards. The pride she felt was overwhelming, mixed with the bittersweet knowledge that William wasn't there to see this moment. After the ceremony concluded, Emma remained at her post, beginning her first official watch as a royal guard. She noticed a little girl in the crowd, pointing at her with wide eyes, tugging on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, is that a real princess?" the child whispered loudly. The father smiled and knelt down beside his daughter. "No, sweetheart, that's a royal guard. She's protecting the palace and everyone in it." The little girl stared at Emma with fascination. "Girls can be guards?" "Girls can be anything they want to be if they work hard enough," the father replied. Emma maintained her composure and position, but inside her heart swelled with emotion. This was exactly why her father had loved his service and why she had chosen to follow his path. It wasn't just about ceremony or tradition. It was about representing possibility, dedication, and the idea that some things were worth protecting and preserving. As the day progressed, Emma encountered the same mix of challenges and rewards that her father had written about in his journal. Tourists asked questions, children stared in wonder, and fellow guards supported each other through the long hours of standing at attention. Each interaction reinforced her conviction that she had made the right choice. That evening, after her shift ended, Emma sat in her small apartment and opened her father's journal to the last entry he had made before his death. His handwriting was as familiar as her own, and his words brought comfort and validation to her heart. "Today I realized that being a royal guard isn't just about the individual wearing the uniform. It's about being part of something that connects past, present, and future. When I put on this uniform, I carry the legacy of everyone who wore it before me, and I'm creating a foundation for everyone who will wear it after me. I hope that someday, someone who matters to me will understand the honor and responsibility that comes with this service." Emma smiled through her tears as she read these words. Her father had somehow known that his legacy would continue through her, that his commitment to service and honor would inspire the next generation. By choosing the path of a royal guard, she hadn't just honored his memory. She had proven that dedication, integrity, and service to something greater than oneself could transcend generations. Outside her window, the lights of London twinkled like stars. And Emma felt the deep satisfaction that comes from living a life aligned with one's deepest values and purpose. Tomorrow, she would return to her post, continuing to protect not just a building or a tradition, but an ideal that her father had helped her understand and embrace.